And welcome everybody to the Huddle, K9 streaming sports talk show. We are back in 2023 for another year. I'm Jason Barr, joined by Pat Parris. Pat, good afternoon. How are you today?
Doing well, Jason. Yeah, a little break for the holidays and first couple of weeks off here in the new year and ready to go.
Yeah, terrific. We got the climate control fixed here. I'm comfortable. I'm pumped up and ready to go after a few weeks off. So I figured we'd start, with the big team, of course, here in Tucson, and that's the University of Arizona men's basketball. And as we come to you today, they're 15-3. 15-3 feels a little different if you're on an 8-game winning streak. Then 15-3 feels kind of the way they've got there, with a couple of stumbles recently. But Pat, it's a good team, okay, but it's not a team that can just show up and win. They're not that good, even at home. And if they're not the more desperate team, the more hungry team, they're going to lose. And they've been tripped up a couple times in the last couple of weeks because of that, I think.
Yeah, and I think that Oregon game was kind of that scenario too, where Arizona had come off the win against Oregon State, didn't look great, but looked good enough to get the win. They were the better team, but Oregon was desperate, right? And Oregon played with a desperation that you'd like to see Arizona play with when they're on the road in a hostile environment. Didn't work out that way for Arizona, unfortunately. Just a little off shooting wise, little off with Kerr Kriisa turning the ball over and getting foul trouble. And that's an area we could talk about too, Jason, is the difficulty it seems at times for Tommy Lloyd maybe to rein in Kerr Kriisa, to get him to focus on what's important and make the right moves instead of trying to take the game over himself.
Yeah, Kriisa's, he's not been a consistent player since he's been here. We haven't seen the same consistency from Courtney Ramey, from Cedric Henderson. Pelle Larsson hasn't always been so smooth, making that transition from a starter or from six-man off the bench to the starter that he is now. And so, that's where the difference is, say, between, last year's team. You had a couple of first rounders and where you're seeing a little stumble, but at the same time, they're as good as you can be in the front court with Oumar Ballo and Azuolas Tubelis. And they've got an exciting 17-year-old player coming off the bench in Kylan Boswell, who's really worked his way up the rotation for Tommy Lloyd's team.
He really has looked good, Jason, and he's going to get more and more playing time, obviously. You look at, unfortunately, we saw Oumar Ballo, some medical issues that slowed him a little bit. Seems to be getting better and better. His shooting certainly was better against Oregon, although he ran into his fellow countryman that had just an outstanding game for Oregon. But I look for that front court again to be key for this Arizona team offensively. But at the same time, Jason, you've got to get some secondary scoring, or in this case, it'd be your third and fourth, guys getting some points, and we're just not seeing that right now. There's still time. I'm not giving up on this team. They've lost 2 out of the last 3. There's no panic button to push right now. This is a team that isn't as good as some people, including maybe you and I thought 2-3 weeks ago. Maybe they're not quite that good, but it doesn't mean they can't get there. There's still plenty. What is there? 14 more Pac-12 games left. There's plenty of season left.
The backcourt wins in March more often than not. Concerned about the backcourt, concerned about the three-point shooting defense. They just leave too many guys wide open, and it wasn't exposed early on with a lot of misses by opposing teams. They're not a good three-point defensive team. It's not an area that is stressed by Tommy Lloyd. And, I think fans got a little spoiled based on how good they were last year record-wise, and, a number one seed in a Sweet 16 appearance. And you come back and you say, well, look how much Dalen Terry improved. Look how much other guys improved. Maybe we'll see Courtney Ramey and Cedric Henderson, be that good for this team. And Pelle Larsson, but really the only guy who I think was really taking a big improvement forward is Azuolas Tubelis, who's just having a fantastic season, an all Pac-12 type of season, Pac-12 Player of the Year type of year. Don't know if he's going to get that. UCLA, they're going to probably win the conference in the regular season. They're 7-0. They're going to be tough to beat, even for a 4-3 Arizona team. And UCLA on a big, I believe it's a 13-game winning streak, something like that. So they're going to be the favorite to win the regular season. But really, that's who's improved. Azuolas Tubelis has shaken off that poor performance last March, and he's really been a fantastic player for this team this year.
He has, Jason. I'll take, I'll differ with you on one point, and I agree. Their three-point defense has let them down. Their teams are are shooting at times, wide open threes. But I think that it still goes back to this team is not very good defensively. And I think that's what's surprising to me is that team last year was so good and so good defensively. This team took a big step back, and I really thought that with Pelle Larsson being a starter and how good defensively he is, and Azuolas Tubelis is a good defender, and of course Ballo can block shots, but they have not been good team defensively, and that leaves wide open three-pointers. And it's not supposed to always just be one guy wide open for a three. You're supposed to trap, and we don't see the trapping. We see attempts at trapping with two guys coming on a guy who's got the ball in the corner or out past the three-point line. But it's not happening with the frequency and with the success that we saw last year. I think that's one of the areas that I think I've been most disappointed with Arizona basketball this season.
All right, so they got the LA schools coming in for the second to last time, possibly, as they go Big Ten in a couple years. It's USC Thursday, and then UCLA, 5th ranked, is going to be here for Saturday. It's a noon game. It's going to be very rare to see Arizona as an underdog at home. That's going to be the case on Saturday,
right,
when they take on the Bruins.
Yeah, and UCLA, I mean, Tiger Campbell and company, they look really good, Jason. I would have thought a couple of weeks ago that they would be at that same level right now, but they're not. It doesn't mean they can't get there. But there's a lot of work that needs to be put in. And this mentality of we show up, we're going to win games, that's out the window now for Arizona.
Yeah, Mick Cronin, of course, a fantastic coach over at UCLA. And he used to coach against former Arizona coach Sean Miller when they were both at Cincinnati and Xavier. And here we got Sean Miller back at Xavier right now. I find it's interesting how he's doing. I don't know that every Tucsonan or every Arizona basketball fan wants to follow how Xavier and how closely he's doing all year long. But boy, he's got that team now ranked 8th in the country. They are on an 11-game winning streak. And it's funny, we talk about 15-3. They're the same record as Arizona. I'm not trying to compare Xavier and Arizona, but what's interesting is they get to 15-3 on an 11-game winning streak. So it feels a little different. Sully Baum is the Big East Player of the Week. I believe he leads the conference in scoring. I believe he's a transfer from UTEP. He's been a fantastic player for Xavier, and it looks like Sean Miller really is where he belongs and where is the best fit for him. It's at Xavier, and you talk about fit, and he just likes the Big East, and he likes winning games with the toughness, and he likes being gritty, and I think he's in his right place, and I think he's even admitted that this year.
It's different basketball, Jason. You and I both know the style of play in the Pac-12 is not the style of play we see in the Big 12. It's not the style we see in the ACC. It's not the style we see in the Atlantic 10. It's different basketball, and maybe it fits his style better. He had a lot of success at Arizona, don't get me wrong, but for whatever reason, that Xavier, it's home to him. It seems like it's the right fit. He's so well known in that part of the country, of course, being a star at Pitt and then going to Xavier, in that Pennsylvania, Ohio region. And so it's a good fit. I will say this, as well as they're playing right now, 11 in a row, they're moving up in the net rankings. I always look at the NCAA net rankings because that's what the tournament selection committee uses. Right now, Arizona is at number 13. Xavier's at number 16. By the way, UCLA number 6. So not only is Xavier ahead of them in the rankings, they're right on their heels in the net rankings. So Xavier appears to be for real, 11 in a row.
Yeah, they'll be in the NCAA tournament and certainly be interesting. Right now,
that if they can do it, Jason,
yeah,
they'll figure out a way.
Right now, would be
whatever.
So right now, that would give both teams kind of like a 4 seed. It could present a 4-5 matchup.
It could, especially if Arizona keeps stumbling here or there. They could end up at a 5.
Yeah, so yeah, they'll work it out. A 4 would play a 13, and a 5 would play
a 12.
12.
Yep.
And then yes, I mean, we'll work it out. We'll get there. There's still a little time, but it's like you said, if they're planning on intriguing mashups, that's going to be near the top of their list. So we'll follow that as it goes along. So quite interesting there. All right, another story today. As we come to you, we record this show and do it live here on a Tuesday. The Cardinals introduced their new general manager today. He's Monty Ossenfort, a former player personnel for the Titans, was a scout for a long time, with the New England Patriots. So he knows Jed Fish. They know each other very well. They were both together in the Houston, Texas organization and in the Patriots organization. So that's an interesting little twist there. All right, let's play a little soundbite, Pat, from Monty Ossenfort's news conference today. Want to play you what he had to say about the type of player he's going for with the Cardinals.
We are not just collecting talent. We're going to build a team. We're going to look for the right type of players. Ego will not be tolerated in this organization. We are going to look for focused, driven, and people that are willing to put the team first at every step of the way.
All right, so he says no ego. I don't think he's talking about players currently on the roster. I think he's talking about who he's going to bring in. I mean, obviously Kyler Murray's got a little bit of an ego attitude, but I don't think that's what he's talking about. I think, when I hear that, I think we're not going to see any diva wide receiver come to this team.
Yeah, it's probably right. He's probably talking about the guys he's going to bring in free agency, guys are looking at for, as far as the draft goes. But he touched on a couple things that's the knock on Kyler Murray. He's a little bit of a me guy.
Yeah.
He's not much of a team guy. He's got an ego. He's got a giant contract. He's playing Call of Duty a little too much. He's not studying the playbook. I mean, I don't know. Good thing is they've got a new GM. The bad thing is he saddled with the last GM's contract with Kyler Murray.
Yeah, so Murray's not even going to be ready for the start of the season, so I don't think this is about him. I think it has to do with more who he is going to bring in, like I said. And
but more importantly, Jason, who's he going to get as a head coach, or who are the Cardinals going to? Because Michael Bidwell is still running that part of the show too, and you need the GM to be on board, and the GM might have some contacts if it's Sean Payton or whoever it might be, but that they've got to get that settled quickly because the draft's going to be here before you know it.
Yeah, they talked about all those cliches about all pulling in the same direction. So I think they'll come to an agreement on that, and we'll find more about the head coach in the coming days. As for their head coach, their former head coach, Kliff Kingsbury, this is a great story here. He bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. Reportedly, okay, and so some other teams wanted to interview him, possibly for a coordinator position. He said, "Thanks, but no thanks. I'm going with my model girlfriend to Thailand, where she's putting stuff on Instagram." And the issue here is, Pat. First off, I actually don't blame Kingsbury. Okay,
no, not
I'm
in the
a little
least.
burned out.
Yep.
The last thing I want to do after I get fired is interview for a job that's a step down in career. I mean, who wants to do that the minute after they get fired? Give the guy a break here. Now, the interesting thing has to do with his contract, right? He's owed $5 million a year through 2027, but we don't know the ins and outs of his contract, okay? Does he have to look for another job, take another job, and then the Cardinals pay the difference? So let's say he goes takes a coordinator job for, a fraction of that salary, and then the Cardinals pay the difference. Is it like we're collecting unemployment in the real world where you have to look for a job? So there's something interesting that's going to play out there with Kliff Kingsbury.
Well, wouldn't we all love to have that ability to have a contract that we're getting paid for and not even having to complete? And yeah, I'd take a trip. I don't know that I go to Thailand, but I'd go somewhere, some exotic place that I've never been and spend some time. And yeah, don't bother me. For Kliff Kingsbury, he's got to he seems to me to be the kind of guy that appreciates some time away. If you watch the Hard Knocks in season on HBO, he came across as very, you couldn't help but root for the guy. A part of you, if you're a Cardinals fan and you root for him, you want them to win and they're not winning, and you've got to blame somebody. Maybe you blame the head coach, but he came across as a fairly sympathetic guy that you wanted to see win. He gave everything he had, and every week something went wrong, and whether it's injuries or turnovers or whatever it was. And I thought he actually looked, fairly impressive with this whole thing. Plus, he's got a cool house, and he jumped in there a couple of times. And he can just go chill in Thailand, whatever he wants to do. I would do the same thing. He needs to recoup. And as you mentioned, Jason, why rush right into a job that's a step down?
Yeah,
take
who
a year,
wants to
take a
interview
year
for that?
off.
I think he's entitled to a year off. If he wants more than a year off, then he shouldn't be in this. You gotta love it. Everybody could use a year off somewhere along the way to recharge their batteries for a job you're working
A
16
gap
hours
year.
a day.
They call it a gap year now. Take a gap year.
Yeah. Well, those jobs, you work a lot of hours. It's very
You do.
stressful. He didn't have Hopkins the first part of the season. He didn't have Murray the last part. Zach Ertz got hurt. There were other injuries. The kind of the tag that he has against him has to do with the late season collapses year after year at multiple stops.
Yeah.
That's just kind of what he's wearing right now. That's going to be tough in the future for him to answer in a head coaching interview. Okay, why are you this and this, in the second half of the seasons in your coaching career when you have a losing record to begin with? That's kind of the stigma he's got to wear for a little bit, I think.
Yeah, and that's why you rehabilitate yourself as a head coach by going back and being an offensive coordinator. In his case, I think
A lot of guys
he'll
get second head coaching jobs,
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So also season coming to an end last night for Tom Brady. I watched his post-game news conference. I don't know. I'm trying to look for little clues, Pat, if he's going to come back or not and which team. Okay. So he wore a backwards hat, right? So no Buccaneers. You can see it in the front, right? The hoodie was just a black hoodie. It wasn't the Buccaneers hoodie, although, that's the kind of the TB12 shirt the hoodie that he came into the stadium with. I get the feeling that he wants to come back for another year, but this is just a vibe I get, but it doesn't have to happen, and it's got to be with the right situation. He and Mike Evans, for whatever reason, were just never on sync. This team had no running game. He was their running game. He set the NFL record for most pass attempts. He threw the ball more than 60 times last night. You can't have no running game and not be in sync with a wide receiver. I thought Evans should have caught many more balls this year than he did.
I'll say this, Jason, if it is his last game, if last night was his last game, boy, that's not the game you want to go out on, right? That was not a good display by him, by that offense. At any point, they never looked like a team that even should have been in the playoffs. And maybe that was indicative of their 8-9 record now. They go 8-10 if you count the playoffs.
Nobody will remember this. Trust me.
I agree. I agree. I'm just saying that was bringing my next point. To me, he's such a competitor. Football is his life, obviously. Competing is his life, and he's not going to want to go out on that note. But the way he thanked all the local media and then thanked the fans for embracing him.
You saw that too.
It just seemed to me like, goodbye, Tampa. Yeah. Thank you very much. If and when I decide to come back, it'll be with a different team. And that's the way I read into that. He's still going to he's not going to rush into the decision like he did last year at this time, where he told everybody he retired and then he had to unretire and had to tell everybody that. But I fully expect him to find the right place, not in Tampa, for what he would perceive as a chance to at least have a shot at winning a Super Bowl.
What do you see as the best fit for him? Certainly the Raiders are talked about.
People always talk about the Raiders.
They contacted him 3 years ago, and
they've got one of the best running backs. They've got the best wide receiver, or arguably the best receiver. The pieces are in place. Was it all quarterback this year for the Raiders? No, but was it a lot quarterback? Probably. So maybe he looks at that as a situation where they're as close as anybody to at least being a playoff team, and then you go from there.
Yeah. We should mention that, congratulations to University of Arizona volleyball coach Dave Rubio, women's volleyball coach, on a fantastic career. He retired 31 seasons at Arizona. He coached, I think, at Cal State Bakersfield before that. He's 570 wins, 20 NCAA tournament appearances. So hell of a career for Dave Rubio. It makes Laura Ianello the most tenured coach now at Arizona, the women's golf coach. And he told Greg Hansen of the paper, it's too hard for me to connect with the generational gap. So maybe the U of A will bring in somebody younger. I don't know if that necessarily needs to happen, but he goes out after a long career on Championship Drive.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's the end of an era, like Mike Candrea leaving. Maybe they didn't have the national championship success, but they certainly had a lot of success under Dave Rubio. And I'm just going to read into it in my own interpretation, Jason. As you see some of these coaches, these long tenured coaches, hanging it up, you just wonder how much not only the younger generation, and maybe they're not connecting as well, but the younger generation also has NIL deals. The younger generation now has a transfer portal. You get, at some point as a head coach, you're probably getting tired of not only having to recruit high school juniors and seniors, but also recruit players off the transfer portal and then recruit your own players to not go into the transfer portal, or if they do, to stay with your team. I don't envy any college coach in any sport right now in Division I, at least at a Power 5 conference. I think that your workload just really increased with the transfer portal.
We didn't touch on Arizona women's basketball. We can do that briefly here. I've been a little frustrated, Pat, at the player rotation. Obviously Adia Barnes knows her team. Perception could trump reality, but it was almost like, boy, I didn't play Aronette Vonleh. She goes to Colorado. She goes there, comes back and beats me with a big performance. I better play Paris Clark. And Paris Clark then has a huge game, and she almost by herself won that game the other night at Utah.
Yeah, Utah.
Now, Paris Clark probably isn't a threat to transfer because apparently she's friends with Jada, the big star coming in for next year. But this is a McDonald's All-American, and this person needs to play. And Lauren Fields is a fantastic defensive player, but she's a liability offensively. Mm-hmm. And you don't have 4 tremendous scorers around her where you can always afford to have her on the court. And as good as Shayna Pellington is at times, she can't shoot.
Right.
And so when you have 2 players on the court who can't shoot, it's just a liability offensively. And sometimes I sit there and I wonder, I feel like Adia Barnes would rather lose a game 62-61 than win it 91-81. All that matters is you score more points than the other team.
Well,
if Paris and Kaylin Gilbert give up a couple of buckets defensively, or they turn the ball over a couple of times, so be it. Let them, as the phrase goes, let them ball out. It'd be more fun. If I'm going to watch Arizona women's basketball lose, and look, they've only lost, 3 or 4 times this whole year. Okay.
Yes.
But if I'm going to watch them lose, I'd rather see a couple of freshmen lose than a senior transfer. And I think the senior transfers, Pat, should be complementing these fantastic young players that Arizona has brought in. And what's happening is these young players are complementing the senior transfers. Having said that, I'm not Adia Barnes. I'm not an expert in she knows her team. She's doing this for a reason. I'm sure there are good reasons, but I say that as a fan.
We've heard Adia Barnes say it before. She said it at the end of last year as well, and that is this, trying to find the minutes for a lot of players has always been tough. And it becomes even more difficult when, again, you bring in the transfer portal, you get seniors transferring in, you get all these, highly touted freshmen coming in. And then you've got Adia Barnes, who's got a mentality of defense first. And you're going to have some of these struggles, these players that, perhaps are a little deficient on the offensive end, but they're good on the defensive end. So I understand your frustration. I see it too. And I'll bet you that Adia Barnes is frustrated by, what's going on, and she'll make some changes, or as she did last game, and we'll see how it all plays out. I will say this, Jason, Pac-12 officiating, that was awful at the end of that Utah game. That is an awful call. Forget Pac-12. You don't see that call made anytime, anywhere, at any level, game on the line with 0.3 seconds left, and you're going to call a foul that's not a foul. It's a defensive player going straight up.
Wait, so you didn't think she made contact?
But in that situation, I know we're going to get this argument, you got to call the foul at every time. In the final, that literally was 1.3 seconds. It gets inbounded. She turns.
Not 1.3. I think it was 0.3.
Well, it was inbounded. It got to her at 1.3. She did bounce, home court clock.
Okay, you're right.
Then she goes up. They put 0.3 back on the clock.
You're right.
My point is that play, let them play. There was no hack. It was a player trying to get off a quick shot. It was a very low percentage shot with a player right in her face, and they decided the game by making that call. I was very frustrated at that. I know Adia was too. She handled it better than I would. I would have blamed the official for stealing the game from my team.
No, and Esmery Martinez was the right player in there. You wanted her length and everything.
That's right.
So
right.
No issues with that. But I mean, they're not even in that spot without without Paris Clark.
That's true.
And
You're
Adidas
right about
made the
that
point
too.
that she made the mistake of having too many players last year, and this just feels like a little bit of a repeat with last year. It's tough to score a bucket, and now Pat, they're in jeopardy. They're out of the top 16 right now, which means they wouldn't host.
Yeah, which they need to host because
They
that's your
need to
big
host.
advantage. Yep, that's your big
Yeah,
advantage.
yeah. So, I don't know what buttons she needs to push here, but it's an unsettled rotation, and it just feels a little bit like last year.
Here's what that gives me a little bit of maybe encouragement,
What's that?
Jason, is the schedule right at the right time. After remember they played a lot of games in a short amount of time because remember they had that weekend where they had to play their regular weekend and then they played Stanford on a Monday. Then they came right back with a Friday Sunday here.
Yeah, but this is a tough ASU game because ASU hasn't been playing for a couple weeks.
Yes,
They're rested.
but so will U of A. They don't have to play again until Sunday now. So my point is, not only maybe you get a little rest, maybe some little nicks, but you're going to practice. This is the time now where you can actually practice through Saturday instead of having to actually game plan on Thursday to get ready for a game Friday and play a game Friday. And that you see, my point is they get a couple extra practices in, they get a little bit more rest. They play an ASU team that is really, really undermanned. So I really think it comes at the schedule finally comes at a right point for them.
Yeah, it's the quasi bye, if you will.
Yes,
for
yes. Your traveling partner comes up on the schedule twice a year.
Exactly. Okay, terrific. All right, well, that's a good note to leave on, an optimistic note for Arizona women's basketball. All right, well, this wraps up. What are we calling this? Season 3, episode 1? Is that
I
how
guess
they do it?
I guess that's one way to look
season
at
3,
it.
episode 1?
I'm just glad they invited us back, Jason. This is great.
S3. So that's for sure. S03E01 is how they write it when I go into my my YouTube TV and
Right. Or your Netflix series.
I'm watching my shows. I think this is S03E1. So, all right, at that. All right, on that note, this wraps up the huddle here for our first one of the calendar year. For Pat Parris, I'm Jason Barr. Thanks everybody for watching, listening live and on record on all the different digital platforms. And we'll see you right back here, same time next week.